What if someone told you that in your country, it is forbidden to sing, dance, or even hug the person you love? Not as a cultural suggestion, not as an unwritten social norm, but as an actual law enforced by armed police, surveillance cameras, and a judicial system that hands out lashes, prison sentences, and death penalties with bureaucratic efficiency. But what if I also told you that despite all of that, despite the fear, despite the cameras, despite the cranes used as gallows in public squares, millions of people are still singing in secret, still dancing in front of hidden cameras, still holding hands in darkened alleys because the human desire for freedom cannot be legislated out of existence. That is the story of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And what you are about to hear is not fiction. Every single case, every law, every punishment mentioned here is real. Some of it will sound impossible. None of it is made up. The Islamic Republic of Iran is one of the most complex and contradictory nations on earth. It sits on one of the most ancient civilizations humanity has ever produced, a land that once gave the world its first declaration of human rights under Cyrus the Great, a land that produced poets like Rumi and scientists who mapped the stars when Europe was still in the dark. And yet, since the revolution of 1979, that same land has become home to one of the most repressive governing systems anywhere on the planet. The regime that took power following the overthrow of the monarchy built an ideological state rooted in a strict interpretation of Shia Islamic law. Every aspect of life, what you wear, what you listen to, who you love, what you believe, what you post online, falls under the jurisdiction of the state. And the state does not forgive. To understand what life looks like inside that system, you do not need abstract political theory. You only need to look at the rules themselves. Because the rules tell you everything about the people who wrote them, the fears that drive them, and the extraordinary courage of those who dare to break them. Start with something as simple as hair. In Iran, a woman's hair is not her own. Since 1983, wearing the hijab, the Islamic headscarf, has been legally mandatory for all women, including girls as young as 7 years old. This is not a matter of personal religious practice or cultural tradition left to individual families. It is the law of the state, enforced by a dedicated unit of morality police known in Persian as the Gashti Irshad, which translates roughly as guidance patrol. These officers, men and women, patrol the streets on foot, on motorcycles, and increasingly through drone surveillance and a network of facial recognition cameras installed throughout major cities. They are not searching for criminals. They are searching for hair. The consequences of non-compliance range from verbal warnings and forced confessions to detention, fines, and in some cases, death. In September of 2022, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman named Mahsa Amini was visiting Tehran with her family when she was detained by the morality police. The charge was improper hijab, a few strands of hair visible beneath her headscarf. 3 days later, she was dead. The Iranian government stated she died of a heart attack. Leaked surveillance footage and testimony from fellow detainees suggested something far more brutal. Her death ignited the largest protest Iran had seen in decades, a movement defined by the slogan "Woman, Life, Freedom." The regime's response was to open fire on its own people. Hundreds were killed. Thousands were arrested. The morality police briefly retreated from the streets, only to return months later with reinforced authority. What makes this law particularly chilling is not just its existence, but its infrastructure. The facial recognition cameras installed by the Iranian government are not, as the regime sometimes claims, for public safety. They are instruments of gender enforcement. Women who appear in public without proper hijab can be identified, tracked, and contacted with legal warnings, or worse, without ever having been stopped on the street. The surveillance does not sleep. The law does not take weekends off, and the women of Iran know it every single morning when they step out the door. But the control does not stop at fabric and hair. In Iran, a woman's voice is considered a threat. Since the Islamic Revolution, religious authorities have maintained that a woman singing alone in public is morally corrupting, that her voice, if heard by unrelated men, constitutes an incitement to impure desires. On the basis of this reasoning, solo female performance has been banned for over 4 decades. It does not matter if the singer is performing at a wedding, recording a private video in her bedroom, or posting a 30-second clip to social media. If a woman's voice reaches the public sphere, she is in legal jeopardy. In 2018, a young woman named Maida Hojabri was arrested for posting videos of herself dancing and singing pop music inside her home. She was 18 years old. Her crime, in the eyes of the authorities, was going viral. She was brought before cameras and forced to deliver a tearful public confession on state television, stripped of her dignity in front of the entire country. She was not an isolated case. In the years since, dozens of women have been summoned by authorities, interrogated for hours, and threatened with criminal charges of immoral behavior simply for singing. In 2023, men who collaborated with women in music videos where the women appeared singing were themselves arrested. The message of the state was precise. A woman's voice must not be heard, and anyone who amplifies it becomes an accomplice to the crime. And yet women keep singing. Some record in apartments with the curtains drawn. Others perform in public parks in broad daylight, knowing the risk, defying it anyway. Because in a country where even a woman's voice is classified as a weapon, singing becomes an act of political resistance. Every note is a declaration of existence. The same logic that criminalizes singing also criminalizes dancing. In many parts of the world, dancing is understood as one of the most fundamental forms of human expression, a way of processing joy, grief, love, and connection through the body. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, it is treated as a criminal act. Public dancing between men and women is strictly prohibited, but the prohibition does not stop at public spaces. If you record yourself dancing in your home and share that recording online, the authorities can use that footage as evidence against you. The government considers dancing a symptom of Western cultural corruption, a deliberate attack on Islamic values by foreign powers seeking to destabilize the nation. In March of 2023, 2 young women, one of whom was only 16 years old, were arrested for filming themselves dancing in front of Azadi Tower, one of Tehran's most iconic landmarks. They were dressed in modern clothing, dancing to a pop song, their hair uncovered. The video spread quickly across social media. What they believed would be a moment of joy and empowerment became a nightmare. Both were detained, forced to appear on state television with visibly altered expressions, stress, and by many accounts, fear written across their faces, and made to apologize publicly. In previous years, other groups of young people have been pursued for creating choreographies at home, celebrating at birthday parties, or simply moving their bodies to music. The police comb through social media posts, identify faces using digital tools, and then come to the door. Even so, the rhythm does not stop. For many Iranians, dancing has become one of the most potent symbols of silent resistance. Every step taken in defiance of the law is a statement. We are still here, we are still alive, and our bodies still belong to us. Perhaps the most viscerally shocking prohibition, at least to an outside observer, is the criminalization of physical affection in public. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, any physical contact between men and women who are not married to each other or not close relatives is forbidden by law. This includes hugging. This includes holding hands. This includes sitting too close together on a park bench. The law does not distinguish between romantic gestures and friendly ones. The law does not care about the context. What matters is the contact and the presence of a morality police officer, an informant, or a surveillance camera to document it. The punishment is not symbolic. Courts have handed down sentences of 74 lashes for a couple caught hugging in public. In one particularly well-documented case, 2 people were arrested during their own engagement party for embracing in front of guests. The charge was improper conduct. The sentence was physical punishment. The regime did not just want to punish them. They wanted to use their humiliation as a lesson for everyone who might have witnessed it or heard about it afterward. The morality police received tips from citizens, sometimes from co-workers, sometimes even from family members. A photograph posted to social media can trigger a formal investigation. Once the state fixes its attention on you, The outcome is nearly always a forced public confession and an exemplary punishment designed to make others afraid. And yet the displays of affection do not disappear. Young people find ways to share intimate moments in the shadows of walls, in the blind spots of cameras, in the brief windows between patrols. Because in a country where a hug becomes an act of rebellion, loving someone becomes a form of protest, the digital surveillance that enforces these laws extends into the most private spaces of all, the screen of your phone. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, social media is not a neutral tool for communication. It is a battlefield. Platforms like Instagram, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, and YouTube are officially blocked by the government, which classifies them as instruments of Western cultural infiltration designed to corrupt Iranian youth and undermine Islamic values. Millions of Iranians access these platforms through virtual private networks, software that masks internet traffic and bypasses government filters. But the use of a virtual private network is itself a punishable offense. Simply attempting to access a free and open internet puts you at risk. The consequences of online activity in Iran can be severe. Influencers, journalists, and ordinary women have been arrested for posting photographs that show too much hair, too much skin, or simply too much freedom. In 2019, a young woman named Sahar Tabar gained international attention for editing her photos to resemble a ghoulish version of a famous actress. Her unusual appearance caught the world's eye and the eyes of Iranian authorities. She was arrested and charged with blasphemy, incitement to violence, and corruption on earth. She spent more than a year behind bars, was forced to issue a public apology, and was banned from social media. Many other women have been summoned by authorities after posting photos without a hijab, even in pictures taken inside their own homes. In 2023, reports from exiled Iranian media revealed that the government had developed spyware applications disguised as local social networks, specifically designed to monitor users who access foreign platforms. Some Instagram accounts operating inside Iran were themselves used as traps, bait to identify dissidents and hand their information to security services. In a country where your reflection can be treated as a crime, your camera is not a tool of self-expression. It is a potential weapon against you. But if digital surveillance represents one face of the regime's control over individual lives, the legal frameworks governing children represent something far darker. In Iran, childhood can end at 9 years old. The country's legal system sets the minimum age for marriage at 13 for girls, already far below international human rights standards. But with judicial approval and the consent of the father, a girl can legally be married at 9. The official justifications draw on interpretations of Islamic jurisprudence and centuries of patriarchal tradition. The lived reality for the girls affected by these marriages is something else entirely. Forced withdrawal from school, teenage pregnancies with severe medical risks, domestic violence, psychological trauma, and in many cases, suicide. International organizations, including the United Nations, have repeatedly condemned child marriage in Iran as a systematic violation of human rights. The government has not only refused to raise the legal age of consent, it has at times promoted early marriage as a symbol of Islamic virtue and moral purity. The morality police, whose stated mission is the protection of Islamic values, do not intervene to protect the girls. They intervene to ensure that the girls comply with the system. One case became a symbol of the violence hidden behind these legal structures. Romina Ashrafi was a teenage girl who attempted to escape a forced marriage. Her father found her and murdered her with a sickle while she slept. Under Iranian law, a father who kills his own child faces a reduced sentence because the victim is considered the property of the perpetrator. The sentence handed down 9 years in prison, not for murder, not for the annihilation of a life. 9 years because the victim was his daughter. The regime's control over its citizens does not end with gender or religion or age. It extends to the act of protest itself, of raising your voice, of walking into a street with a sign, of posting a message online that questions the government. In Iran, protesting against the state can be legally classified as moharabeh, a term from Islamic jurisprudence that translates as enmity against God. Under this classification, participating in a protest, organizing a demonstration, or even expressing support for political opposition can be treated not as a civil matter or even a criminal one, but as a sacred crime against the divine order. The punishment for moharibah is the death penalty. After Mahsa Amini's death in 2022, thousands of Iranians took to the streets. The government's response was the systematic use of lethal force, mass arrests, and public executions carried out with deliberate speed. Majid Reza Ranavard, a young man accused of killing 2 members of the security forces during the unrest, was tried in a process that lasted days rather than months, without meaningful access to a defense. He was hanged from a crane in a public square in broad daylight, weeks after his arrest. The crane was not an accident. It was a message elevated high enough for everyone to see, impossible to ignore, designed to transform a human being into a warning. Activists, students, minors, journalists, and artists have all been executed for participating in protests or for speaking publicly about the government's abuses. The state does not merely want to silence its critics. It wants the population to witness the silencing, to absorb it, to fear it, to carry it home and let it settle in the stomach like a stone. The silencing also extends to those who seek knowledge beyond Iran's borders. There is no formal law in the Islamic Republic of Iran that explicitly prohibits studying abroad. But the security apparatus that monitors Iranian students at foreign universities is thorough, persistent, and deeply suspicious of anyone who returns from an extended period in the West with new ideas, new contacts, or a new perspective on the world. Upon returning to Iran, many students are detained by agents of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, questioned for hours, forced to hand over access to their electronic devices, and sometimes coerced into signing documents with vague, open-ended language that could later be used against them. Several Iranian students who completed academic programs in Europe were arrested on charges of collaborating with foreign governments. Their crime was education. The state does not want its young people to see other ways of organizing a society, other frameworks for thinking about law and freedom and governance. It does not want them to bring those frameworks home. The system is designed to keep a generation isolated, fed a curriculum approved by the state, surrounded by an internet filtered by the state, taught to define the world through the state's ideological lens. Some young Iranians find ways to study abroad and build lives elsewhere. Others pay a price that cannot be calculated in years or fines. The cruelty of the regime does not diminish with age. If anything, for those who have spent decades in its prisons, the punishment only deepens. The Islamic Republic of Iran is one of the very few countries on earth that continues to execute elderly prisoners, men and women who have spent years or even decades behind bars for political offenses, whose bodies have aged in cells, who pose no threat to anyone, and who nonetheless continue to be held until the state decides to finish the sentence it started long ago. Advanced age is not considered a mitigating factor. Decades of imprisonment are not considered a form of punishment already served. The bureaucratic machinery of the Islamic Republic grinds forward until it reaches the end. In 2024, Ali Moetzi, a 72-year-old political prisoner, was executed after spending 18 years in detention. His crime had been participation in activities linked to political opposition groups. Calls for clemency from international human rights organizations were ignored. There was no legal reversal. The execution proceeded on schedule. Because in the Islamic Republic of Iran, the state does not forget your name. Not after 10 years, not after 20, not when you can barely stand. The same totalizing logic that imprisons elderly dissidents also condemns people for who they are in the most intimate and private dimension of human life. Homosexuality is a capital offense in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The country's penal code, rooted in its interpretation of Islamic law, punishes same-sex relationships with lashes, imprisonment, and, in cases the courts designate as severe, death. The charge most frequently applied is that of corruption on earth, a phrase so broad and so flexible that it can be applied to almost any behavior the state wishes to criminalize. For lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex individuals living in Iran, this is not an abstract legal threat. It is the permanent condition of their existence. In 2022, 2 men were executed in secret for alleged sodomy. Their names were not made public within Iran. There was no open trial. Human rights organizations outside the country were able to document the executions, but inside Iran, the government made no announcement. The men simply disappeared. Many more live in the shadows, moving from city to city, hiding their relationships, maintaining false identities, constructing double lives that require constant vigilance and exact a constant psychological toll. Organizations advocating for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex rights are banned. Any attempt at visibility is labeled Western propaganda, an ideological attack on Islamic civilization designed to corrupt Iranian youth. What is celebrated as pride in other parts of the world transforms in Iran into the daily, exhausting work of survival. And finally, there is the question of faith, the most intimate territory of all. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, religious conversion is a matter of state security. The Constitution formally recognizes only Shia Islam, Armenian Orthodox Christianity, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism as tolerated religions. But even these protected groups operate under severe restrictions. For a Muslim to convert to another faith is considered apostasy, a crime that can carry the death penalty. House churches operate in secret. Baptisms are conducted behind locked doors. Christian pastors are imprisoned for holding private worship services. Youssef Nadarkhani, a Christian pastor, was sentenced to death for apostasy in 2010 for having left Islam. Only sustained international pressure and a global advocacy campaign prevented his execution. He was released and then imprisoned again in 2018 on charges of acting against national security. The Baha'i faith, considered by the Iranian government to be a heretical sect rather than a legitimate religion, faces particularly severe persecution. Members of the Baha'i community are barred from attending public universities, excluded from government employment, and subject to arbitrary arrest. Their cemeteries have been bulldozed by government order. The logic connecting all of these prohibitions, the veil, the voice, the dance, the hug, the photograph, the marriage, the protest, the classroom, the cell, the identity, the faith, is the same logic. It is the logic of total control. The Islamic Republic of Iran does not simply want its citizens to behave in certain ways. It wants to own the categories through which they understand themselves, their bodies, their beliefs, their desires, their futures. Every law is a boundary. Every punishment is a reminder of where the boundaries are. And every act of defiance, no matter how small, is a threat to the entire architecture. Because that architecture depends on fear. It depends on the population believing that the cost of resistance is always higher than the cost of compliance. And it has worked, partially, imperfectly, inconsistently, for over 4 decades. But not completely. Women still leave their homes with their hair uncovered, walking past cameras with quiet, deliberate calm. Young people still post videos of themselves dancing, knowing the government will look for them. Couples still hold hands in the streets of Tehran, quickly, defiantly, before slipping around a corner. Singers still record their voices in small apartments late at night and send those recordings out into the world through encrypted channels. Protesters still take to the streets, carrying homemade signs, looking straight into the cameras they know are watching them. The prohibitions are real. The punishments are real. The fear is real. But so is the resistance. And in a country where nearly everything has been forbidden, choosing to live with dignity is the most radical act of all. These are not just laws on paper. They are the daily reality of millions of people, mothers, daughters, students, artists, believers, and lovers, who wake up every morning inside a system designed to diminish them. Every name mentioned in this video belongs to a real human being who paid a real price for existing on their own terms. Their stories deserve to be told, heard, and remembered, because the first step toward change has always been the refusal to look away. If this video moved you, if it made you angry, if it made you think, that reaction matters. Share this video so that more people understand what is really happening inside one of the world's most misunderstood countries. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. And leave a comment below. Tell us which story hit you the hardest and which hidden history you want us to uncover next. The world has more stories like this one. We are going to tell all of them.